thought you had a full pipeline. Then your longest running client ended the contract early, and you realized you hadn't been building anything behind it. Alison Keutgen is a fractional CMO and founder of Inovari. She's 2 years into a consulting practice that has already crossed six figures. In her corporate career, she worked across 9 industries, embedded in everything from seed-funded healthcare startups to Midwest manufacturers. In this conversation, Alison explains exactly why she didn't prioritize building a pipeline system when she had long-term clients, and what that cost her when those contracts abruptly ended. She also names something most fractionals don't talk about: why 40 hours of fractional work is more like 60 hours of actual time spent at work. Why broad industry experience can make it harder for your network to refer you, and what she's doing now to build a practice that doesn't depend on any single client staying. My name is AJ Riedel, and this is Thriving Through, the podcast where each week I have real conversations with self-employed consultants about what it really takes to build a profitable, sustainable consulting practice. Let's dive right in. Welcome to episode 117 of the Thriving Through podcast. Today, my guest is Alison Keutgen. Alison, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, AJ. It's a pleasure.
Take me back to when you first got that initial client and you set up Inovari.
Mm-hmm.
You said you had no idea if you'd stick it out.
Right.
So walk me through what a typical week looked like then, and then fast forward to now 2 years in.
Right. It's a great question. I don't think there really was a typical week back then. I was at a startup at the time, and there were just some things going on. The writing was kind of on the wall that maybe it wasn't going to survive, or that, at least there were going to be some team reduction and realignment across everything. And so I had started putting some feelers out, and was put in touch with what became my first client. And at first we were even thinking about full time. And throughout those conversations, we both just identified mutually that something of a fractional nature was going to be a better fit for them. And I had been researching, poking around. I had heard a little bit about, fractional CMOs and things of that nature, and having the, wide breadth of background that I have, that was something that I started to explore as a potential fit, right? I wasn't really sure. And so flashing forward to from then till now, I mean, I don't know if there is a typical day. I think there's maybe a little bit more structure now. I've actually continued to be with that client over a couple years. And so, we have a great cadence. We're aligned. I know what they need to be doing and, what direction the team needs to be going. And, we also I've been able to kind of structure hours in the week a little bit more with them. So the team knows when I'm going to be in office, and then I communicate freely on any of the times that maybe I won't be, right? Or if we need to kind of shuffle things around, there's a level of flexibility there that they're really amazing to work with on. So.
Okay. 2 years in, what is keeping you up at night about your consulting business or your fractional business?
Sure. I always knew that the benefit of my network would come to an end at some point, and you never really get to know when that end is, right? And, this is the beauty of networking just over the years and working at different places and always being open to conversations and meeting people in interesting sectors, right? I'm not a huge extrovert, to be honest with you, but I've always really enjoyed speaking with other people in other professions and just understanding their story and, what their challenges are and just how that shows up in different ways. Being a lot from a product world, cross functionality is a huge thing. And so I always took an interest in, expanding that. So flash forward to a couple years in, and I wonder, did I move fast enough at building a sustainable pipeline and having the right business development infrastructure and systems in place to really optimize the amount of time that I spend on that side of the business, right? So I'm, thinking through, contemplating some of that stuff. I'm doing a lot of content creation as well, just thinking about different ways to create efficient lead magnets and just not even lead magnets also sounds terrible sometimes, right? Like you're trying to sell something. And for me, it's less about selling something. It's more about trying to create the bridge between things that I know I'm good at and things that I know certain types of businesses might need, right? And I think that's also an interesting challenge too, is to try to identify how you can express that authenticity and your authentic voice and really connect it with other, individuals that you could actually help in the process. So I would say right now it's a bit in that world of, making sure I'm continuing to grow my network, cultivate my network, but also, figure out more or less the right ways to build that business development pipeline and system infrastructure to kind of just support it humming and spinning like a top, right?
Okay. Do you feel like that structure and system is in place
Just
yet?
about, yeah. I've done a
Okay.
lot of work over the last couple months and spoke with many people. They all, who you are. So thank you for your assistance. So there's been some great, guidance and learnings from others who have done similar either consulting or fractional type work, and practices more or less, and understanding what's worked for them and, all of those good learnings. So it's come a long way.
Okay. You when we met or when we last talked, I asked about the origins of your name, company name.
Yeah.
So tell us, Inovari. Tell us how Inovari, the name came about.
Right. Well, truth be told, I wanted to have some type of basic structure established when I brought on my first client and was starting to speak with other potential clients. So I know I needed a name. I needed to at least have a placeholder there and something that I could grow into if I was going to stick with, within this world. And speaking with a good friend of mine who we also used to work together, I had tried to leverage, I think, ChatGPT at the time to give me some thought starters and ideas and having it mix words and, just do the things that honestly it wasn't that great at.
Mhm.
And but it got kind of close on a few that probably did give me a few creative juices along with my friend to come up with a new spin on innovation. And so Inovari is mixing innovation and safari because innovation can be like a safari sometimes. So that was the true origin of it and what it means and just, how you navigate through product development and innovation and sometimes just strategic projects. It doesn't always have to be an, revolutionary concept that you're trying to shepherd forward. Sometimes there's just other normal complexity that occurs in strategic projects, and you are also on a safari there too.
Okay. When you do you get people asking about the origins of your name?
No, I honestly don't. And you asking it triggered a to-do for me that I should probably address it, write about it, or somehow otherwise include it within my content. So I will be doing that.
Well, it's memorable,
Thank
and
you. Thanks.
yeah. You described having zero predictability in your income right now when we
I'm
talked
sorry, what's that?
earlier. You described having zero predictability in your revenue right now when we talked earlier.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And
Close, not zero, but sometimes it's highly variable. Yeah.
okay, highly variable in your revenue. What does that actually cost you? That what is commonly called the feast or famine cycle, which is very common with consultants. What does it cost you? And I don't just mean money. What's the real toll of revenue variability or unpredictability?
Right. Yeah, I've had a few clients where the intention was long term, but long term, like beyond 6 months, right? There was more of a runway there based on what they were trying to do and what they needed and how we were jiving together, right? There was,
Mm-hmm.
great relationships there. And economic factors stepped in and some, very random factors, I would say, occurred and shifted things abruptly. And so it is, um, of course, it can be anxiety provoking because being right now, I'm an individual, right? I have not chosen to take that growth step into bringing additional people under my umbrella, also as a fractional basis. And so when you're the one doing the work and the business development and, trying to balance and forecast that, it can definitely be tricky. It can provoke anxiety. It can be tricky to manage because you're always doing the calculated balance of where's the highest impact of my time, right? If you believe you have a few clients that are long term, you know the goal, you know the runway, you know the timeline, you don't always choose to prioritize some of the extra time in some of the business development activities. At least I didn't. That was my probably learning now, right? Like error. There's
Mm-hmm.
people probably watching this that are saying, silly woman, you probably should have
Most of them,
anticipated that a little bit more.
well,
And
no, actually,
it,
most of them are probably saying, yep, I can relate.
yeah, same, right? And so it can be really tricky because you don't always want to live in a ball of anxiety of, and it's also hard to fill the pipeline when you do believe that, you have a longer runway or your contract says you do, right? And so that's where it can be very tricky from a fractional basis where, you enter that agreement, you believe you're talking about months, right? At minimum, you're not usually the project-based consulting, right? And so when factors come out of left field and change that, that can definitely throw things for a loop. And then what you thought you had, you need to go back and fill it. So,
It's that
yeah,
OSHIT moment of, oh, I thought I had a full pipeline and now I don't.
right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't have any answers beyond empathy with anyone else who goes through that. I think, like you said, almost everybody does at some point, especially in the beginning. And, one of the things that I'm starting to prioritize a little bit higher up on my list are different ways to diversify some of my revenue streams, even with me being the principal and, the primary worker as well. And just thinking through other avenues of advisory or coaching or other types of content that, I might be able to monetize because it reaches a certain value set. So there are things to explore that all kind of fall under that business development time, right?
Mhm. Right. You you've been doing the fractional work for 2 years and you have clients and you know how to deliver. If I want you to kind of do a little envisioning. If the pipeline problem wasn't in the way,
Mhm.
if you had a steady stream of the right clients, what would your practice actually look like right now?
I would likely be more deeply contemplating expansion.
Expansion in terms of hiring other people, or what do you mean by expansion? Tell me more.
Yes. Yep. I would be more deeply evaluating the ability to expand headcount, not crazy, but to initiate what that runway looks like and, evaluating and business planning the things that have to be true to support it. And, what else do I need to kind of tip the scales to in order to get to that moment and
Mhm.
feel comfortable and also being able to provide, enough of a runway for that individual as well. So I think I would be looking more at that, given that situation.
Okay. Would it be somebody who would also be a fractional, or are you looking at looking at team to support you as a fractional?
I would say would also be a fractional. I
Okay.
think, the fun part is I've got I've been afforded the opportunity to meet a lot of people and over the course of time, including other consultants and other fractional leaders and people that are a little bit more of a yin yang, right? And
Hmm.
so that has also kind of spurred some thinking around, okay, not only do we start to build our little ecosystem and network, right? And how does that impact how we're able to help refer? But then that gives you a little bit of insight into opportunities that when I am ready to expand headcount, what type of additional fractional leader will be a good fit, right? And what avenues or what types of categories, business categories is what I mean when I say that word, are going to be complementary to the types of work that I do, and what are maybe some areas that I have experience in, but not as deep knowledge that would also be a great spot for someone who actually does have the deep knowledge to come in. So
Okay.
thinking, divergent thinking a lot lately.
And that's what having a steady stream of the right clients would enable you to do, is to be able to think about how do you round out your team so that you can offer not only your services but complementary services by
Right.
having someone else working with you.
Yeah, exactly.
And what kind of revenue is sort of your goal? Are you looking, at high six figures? Do you have any revenue idea in mind where you want to be in, say, a year or two?
I'm honestly in the process of evaluating that because it is a big difference, right? It's one thing if I'm limited to the hours in the day that I have, and it's another thing to think about some of the hours in the day that I have, but then also expanding headcount. I think that if I got to the point in the next couple of years that I could build a pipeline to a point where it, made a safe calculated risk to bring on headcount, then, mid to upper six figures, I think should be feasible. There are, I think that there are scenarios that could be true to elevate that. Those require a bit more thought and white, dry erase boarding to flush out, validate, and ensure that they can actually reach fruition. So
You don't have to give an exact number, but so you're saying mid to high six figures is your goal. And that's at the point where you can start to realize that vision of having a team. Where are you now?
low, low six figures.
Okay. But you've reached six figures,
Yes. Oh yeah.
which is a lot of consultants don't. So you have, pat yourself on the back that you've reached six figures.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a lot of work, but good.
You you when you have two pretty different ideal client profiles or industries. You've got healthcare, healthcare tech and manufacturing.
Right.
And you said your manufacturing targets are lurkers who don't show up on LinkedIn and only surface at a few trade shows a year.
I think that's my hypothesis.
Okay. So when you think about that challenge, reaching people who are basically invisible until you're in the same room with them, what have you already tried to find those people?
I'm really early in that process. And I would say it was just the last couple months that I put pen to paper on narrowing my ICP into something that was going to be my first kind of step into the full pipeline building and, system infrastructure, like all of that on how I try to optimize this whole piece of the process. So I don't actually have any answers on that at this point, besides this is where networking really has to shine between, I have being in West Michigan, manufacturing is everywhere. A lot of my product experience has been on building tangible, engineered physical goods.
Mhm.
So I do have quite a bit of, I do have quite a few contacts, right, within this world. And being able to reach out to them and asking for, almost like persona connections. Do you have anyone in your network that I could maybe buy a coffee for that fit this bill, right? Or that you have heard talk about struggling with X, Y, and Z. There's, a lot going on, not just with technology, but we have a lot of tier 2, tier 3 below, right? Manufacturers within the Midwest, not just West Michigan, but Detroit, Chicago, and, this whole region. So people know people. It's how do you get crafty on getting niche enough, right? And I think this is what we all have to deal with is how do you get the Goldilocks of niche for your ICP, right? So when
Mhm.
you're networking and communicating with others, you can ask for that bridge and they'll know what you're talking about. And they also can think of, one, two, or three people within their Rolodex that they say, oh, yeah, they could totally, benefit from this conversation. Like I said, I don't have any answers on it right now. These are all of my, hypothesis and also just work that I am pursuing to try to bridge those connections and pressure test and complete really quick learning cycles so I can adjust on the fly, and, iterate to make it work. The healthcare side is interesting because my career has been very split between corporations and really early startups. And most of the startups have been within the healthcare space, doing really amazing things. And they were all awesome to work at. And they're a much different animal than the manufacturing side. And so, with that, though, there's healthcare technology is not going to go away at this point. It's only, going to continue to expand and evolve. So that's where the two very distinct and a bit polar ICPs come from.
If I told you that you had to pick one,
Mhm.
which one is more appealing to you?
That's a great question. I I don't know. I don't think for right now, there's not one that's more or less appealing. They both uh, they both have ample opportunity for growth, for being able to get things done, to be able to show traction, to be able to drive value for the client. So those are really some of the characteristics that I'm attracted to, right? And I think this is another one of those common things that we all have to get really good at, not just bridging the conversation to see if there's, work to be had, but also in making sure it's a good fit for both parties. Because we've all struggled through, getting involved with a client that isn't always a great fit. And,
Mm-hmm.
you want to make sure that you can identify that early and or also just figure out, how to make a clean exit if you really need to, if it's not going to pan out. So I look at them as more characteristics, but that's also where I really need to and have been challenged to add a little bit of the demographic on top of my characteristics because a lot of others will think in that way, right? Like, okay, who's your category? What's your industry? I say I'm industry agnostic. I've worked in 8 or 9 industries at this point. I bring the similarities and the cross pollination and, it's like, let's go to work. But I can see how that can be difficult for people then to know how to connect me to others.
Right. Yeah, you've nailed, it's you can do it and you see the connections, but do other people see the
Mm-hmm.
connections? So you talked about this a couple minutes ago. I want to come back to it. You're looking for other revenue streams because you only have, well, first, one of the things you mentioned before we go that down that line of questioning, you mentioned that 40 hours of fractional work is like 60 hours, 60 non-fractional hours.
I think so, yes.
Tell me more about, what do you mean by that? Tell me more.
It's, I've been reflecting on it for a little while now because at first I didn't really understand that. But after speaking with other fractional people, I remember a coffee, probably about a year ago, with a contact from a place. We actually worked together when I was at a manufacturer, and she was an outside consultant. And we always got along great. And so I caught up with her over coffee probably about a year ago. And at one point, she goes, "Wait, you're working 40 hours?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No, it sucks." Like this, like I'm fried. I got burnout at the startup and I wasn't recuperated. And then, rolling right into that was insane. It was insanity. I do not recommend at all. And part of the problem was then you don't have business development time, right? And you don't have like that decompression time. And when I reflect on it so far, I think that it really comes down to it's the neural fatigue. Your clients, everyone's human, right? Like at this point anyways, you still have to deal with humans. And they are emotional, right? Mental. They bring their own stuff to the table. Business culture across clients can be a 180, right? And if you can't always time block them, right? So that you're kind of chunking your work every once in a while, I get in one of those days where things just had to, we're on a timeline, we're on a deadline, and things just dropped like back to back within the same day from one client to the next, to the next, to back again. And those transitions are, I think, what are very fatiguing because you almost have to put on the, okay, what's this culture, right? And you kind of have to put that piece of, armor on more or less, or whatever you want to call it. That's maybe not the right word, but you know, you need to blend, you need to be able to be productive and get things done with them. So you kind of need to culture match a little bit depending on what that is and how they're used to operating. So all of that transition, I think, is what adds up to making 40 hours feel like 60 plus, because it's quite exhausting.
Right. Well, and it is because it takes you, if you're working for several different clients in a day, there's a certain period of time when you finish one before you can really fully ramp up to the next one.
Mhm.
It's
And
what they say about multitasking is that every time you switch tasks, it takes your brain a little while kind of to catch up. So you're experiencing
correct.
that.
Correct. And I think it's just elevated because of some of those additional elements. And I did spend my time in office furniture, and I do recall us talking about transitions and exactly what you just said, right? It's the multitasking, it's then transition from teamwork to, deep thought or individual work or, more heavy into your knowledge work. I always like to use, spreadsheet land as one of those places that can sometimes take a lot of focus depending on what you're doing and how much you like spreadsheets. And so, all of that transition we know is a thing. And then I think doing that across companies, especially if they're very different business units, that's, just kind of compounds the effects of it.
Right. Hence the reason you're going down this other revenue streams is that
Right.
you don't want to necessarily be working 40 hours a week of fractional because there's a ceiling since it's you're trading time for money when you're a fractional. So there's a
Right.
ceiling. And it
Right.
sounds like you felt that ceiling from time to
Yes.
time.
Yes.
So tell me about what you're looking at in terms of other areas of revenue.
Right. Mainly exploring the advisory capacity. And sometimes that ends up a little bit like coaching, or there's different lenses on, I think, the advisory category. And I don't know what it looks like yet, to be honest with you, but I've, been blessed to have the experiences that I have had. And a lot of times that affords productive conversations with people who either, their team is stuck, right? They're like, I don't get it. Trying to get X, Y, and Z done. And we're just, we're not getting through, right? So that's a place that I have found, colleagues in coffee chats have complimented me on giving them some fresh ideas, or just this is where I think the cross pollination can really come in as a benefit because
Mhm.
I've worked across different types of industries, a lot of different types of teams, have led a lot of that cross functional nature. And so I have a great storybook to pull from, right? And then likewise on the startup side, I mean, I've started things from scratch, and I've been at seed funded, startups, and have been in that growth mode, and the almost like the 911 we need to grow tomorrow mode, right? And startups are a whole different animal. And sometimes when you're in the middle of that, you can't always zoom out. You're not always afforded the opportunity, the energy, the time, the capacity, like pick a word, right? To zoom back out and do a little bit of that systems work to troubleshoot, problem solve, or just like block and tackle certain things that need it. So also, sitting down with people in that capacity, I've been told has been beneficial for them. So I'm starting to play around with those types of areas to see if, how I communicate that, right? How do I build content around it? How do I create lead magnets for it? How do I, again, this goes back to that whole how you bridge the communication out and make it connect, with the other party in a meaningful way that really lands with them. So others aside from that, it's like I take my own medicine too and go back to the consumer research side and just try to talk to people, right? So when I am at networking events, it's trying to uncover like what keeps you asked me when I like to also ask people, what keeps you up at night right now for real? Is it
Mhm.
juggling everything, or is there something really specific? And at this day and age, you really never know what you're going to get within that response.
So I want to switch gears as we start to wind down.
Hmm.
Are you ahead or behind where you wanted to be by now?
That's hard to respond to because like any other business, it's not this linear hockey stick, right? So I would say I'm about on target for where I was expecting, but we'll also see how the back half of the year goes as well, because I do need to, get some of these pipeline things set up and also everything that we just talked about, right? Like a lot of things need to happen and just working through the right priority and time commitment for them to kind of get the rest of the foundation propped up and humming will, kind of dictate how things roll.
Got it. Got it. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation, Alison. I've really enjoyed talking with you. And
Likewise.
for those of you listening, thank you for listening to the Thriving Through podcast. And Alison, I appreciated having you, and keep thriving through.
It was great to connect with you. Thank you so much.
The thing that stuck with me from this conversation is something Alison said about her own experience. She didn't prioritize business development when she felt secure. And when those contracts ended, she had nothing behind them. That is the feast or famine cycle in its purest form. Not a pipeline problem, a mindset problem about when pipeline building feels urgent enough to do. Alison, thanks for being so honest about what you're still working through in your practice. If you want to connect with Alison, check the show notes for her website and LinkedIn. Before you go, if you're listening to this and your pipeline feels unpredictable, or if you're wondering which marketing activities are actually working, I built something for you. It's called the Consultant's Marketing Scorecard. It's free, takes less than 15 minutes, and you'll get 3 scores showing you exactly where your marketing is strong, where it's weak, and what to fix first. No generic advice, no sales pitch, just clarity. You'll find the link in the show notes. Go take it. Thank you for listening to the Thriving Through podcast. If you liked this episode, I have 3 quick steps for you. Click subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you watch or listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Leave me a review in your podcast app so other self-employed consultants can find and benefit from the podcast too. To put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to ajriedel.com/podcast for the show notes and other resources. Until next time, keep thriving through.